Good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Giuseppe Berretti. I'm policy advisor for Healthcare and Provident Fund at the European Association of Paritarian Institutions. And so welcome to the EMEcs project second online workshop, Strengthening Social Protection for Posted Workers in Time of Emergency. The European market environment in the construction sector, EMEcs, aims to identify how COVID-19 affected posted workers in the construction sector. So during today's workshop, we will present the project EU handbook, which gathers main challenges in terms of social protection and health and safety at work faced by posted workers during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the solution developed by member states. We will have after this presentation, a panel discussion with the social partners, FIEC and ETUC, who will provide their point of view on the handbook. And I see in the public many participants from labor authorities, national inspectorates, social partners, and also paritarian institutions. So I would like to highlight that this is actually a workshop, so everyone is more than welcome to provide input, comment, and questions. You can do that in the chat, raising your hand, and also we will have a dedicated session, Q&A session after the panel discussion, so everyone will have the chance to take the floor. Let me now start with a quick presentation of my organization, EEP, Paritarism in relation to construction sector and the added value of the paritarian model. So, quickly to introduce my organization, the European Association of Paritarian Institutions, EEP, is a Brussels-based advocacy organization representing social protection providers as pensions, healthcare, and provident funds, which are established and managed by employers and trade unions on a paritarian basis, meaning with the equal and joint representation of both social partners within the framework of collective agreement. All EEP members are based in EU member states, and they are necessarily non-for-profit and are also long-term investors, institutional investors. We represent paritarian funds in 12 EU member states, which provides social protection cover of around 80 million European citizens and operate with around 1.3 billion of assets under management. We work on the basis of thematic working groups comprised of national paritarian institutions or their national representatives. In terms of the concrete types of schemes we represent, members that are coordinated retirement schemes, first pillar BIS, occupational pension funds, second pillar of pensions, paritarian insurers, and provident funds. And as last point, we represent also schemes specific for the construction sector as paid holiday schemes and accident insurance. These schemes compose our working group on the construction sector. The working group includes as members also the European social partners in the construction sector, the European Federation of Building and Woodworkers, CFPWW, and the European Construction Industry Confederation, FIEC, on the basis of our protocol of cooperation. Our purpose as an organization in the past 20 years was to represent the interests of our members and the EU at EU level and participate in the European decision-making on behalf of the paritarian institution we represent in the field of European social and economic policies. Let me now present you some important considerations for the operation of paritarian funds. We define paritarism as a type of self-organization of social relationship, which on the basis of equal negotiation between the social partners results in collective agreements that are equally binding for both employers and employees. The purpose of a paritarian institution is to provide social protection coverage, which complements the existing governmental social security system. The paritarian management is achieved through the composition of the management board and supervisory board, meaning that there is an equal number of representatives of both trade union and employee organizations that take decision on the management and operation of the organization jointly. And to conclude, the paritarian funds exist on a result of alignment of views and common will between the social partners, and they are the institutionalization of the right of self-regulation, as provided for the social and labor law of the state. Let's now see which is the added value of paritarian institutions. First of all, the fact that the representatives of trade unions always take part in the decision-making process. This ensures that workers will not only be more aware of their rights and obligations, but also that they can actively require adjustments according to their own needs. The non-for-profit character of paritarian funds ensures that the coverage of a risk is as broad as possible, and that the fund management takes consideration beyond financial factors. The existence of paritarian funds ensure a better promotion of general welfare by ensuring an adequate protection of social groups through their effective representation. Indeed, better coverage ensures more social resilience. Now, some points specifically on the construction sector and the added value at sectorial level. The construction sector is a fragmented sector, mostly including small and medium enterprises, high-risk accidents, high mobility of workers, and it has particular working and employment conditions. Paritarian schemes in the construction sector can provide a more flexible solution to social protection that is better adapted to these specifics. The operation of our members in the construction sector has demonstrated that indeed they ensure a better prevention and decreasing accident rate. Of course, that is of interest both of employers and workers. They ensure also improved working conditions, allowing for more predictability and safety net for workers, given that employment varies and does not continue in a stable way throughout the year. Paritarian institutions are also better equipped to address sector-specific challenges, specific needs and emerging trends, and common challenges. Social protection concerns both employers and workers, and it can be ensured to be effective only if they take these decisions collectively. I will expose you now some specific challenges for social protection provision in the construction sector from the perspective of paritarian funds. First of all, there are substantial decreases in trade union membership or de-unionization throughout Europe. This, of course, means less capacities and less basis for effective industrial relations. The situation is very different in Central and Eastern European member states. They also have, on average, lower union density than EU14 countries' average of 14%, with the exception of Slovenia and Croatia. Changing economic conditions and lack of predictability, especially in the current situation, lead to a lack of stability. The emergence of a new form of work and a higher number of self-employed means that this will further intensify the trend of de-unionization, as these workers are less likely to be unionized. At the same time, there is an overall trend of digitalization also in the construction sector, and this would require adaptability of worker skills. And to conclude, some last point on how paritarian funds are addressing these challenges and where we see opportunities. Paritarian institutions are working on the basis of long-term perspective, reconciling adequacy versus sustainability, therefore the economic and social aspects in the provision of social protection. We believe that an agreement between the government and social partners is the best way to ensure a balance between solidarity and level of coverage. Paritarian institutions are able to provide flexible and tailor-made solutions against the rising sector-specific challenges of the labor market, such as vocational training. We also see the process of modernization, innovation, and digitalization of social protection as a task for social partners and their paritarian institution of social protection. On the topic of today, posted workers are a vulnerable category of workers, which often is not covered sufficiently by social protection for various reasons. For example, the lack of transparency of employment contracts, the cross-border nature of the job, or the lack of clarity on the legal responsibility of the hosting and sending country. As EAP, we strongly believe in the mission of the EMEcs project to understand the weaknesses of social protection system during the pandemic, which showed that there is a real need to reinforce existing institutions of social protection. For us, this is a priority that would ensure more effective and resilient social protection systems and will guarantee fairer and safer conditions of employment in the future. For these reasons, the European Association of Paritarian Institutions is happy to be part of the EMEcs project consortium, together with national paritarian institutions and social partners. So on behalf of the project consortium, we would like to thank you all for being here today and to contributing to this discussion. So I'm now leaving, without further ado, I leave the floor to Feliciano Iudicone from the Italian Joint National Committee for Building Workers' Welfare Funds, CNCE, who is the leader of the consortium, who will present the EU handbook. So Feliciano, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe, and thank you everybody for joining. As we are not many today, I will, while exposing, of course, please raise your hand if you have some question. I think this is a good chance also to have a discussion if there is any point that you would like to address more in detail or any doubts. Actually. As today I'm supposed to present also some of the recommendation of the project, I thought to enlarge a little bit the scope of the presentation. So starting from the context, starting from the first phase, to then of course delve into the specific findings from the EU handbook, which dealt especially with occupational safety and health and social protection of posted workers. So basically, we actually departed from the background for our study, which is meant to address which were the problems triggered by the pandemic for posted workers in the construction sectors, where of course to understand, first of all, which are the main restrictions to cross-border movement across the covered countries which include Italy, Germany, Poland, Portugal, Spain, and Romania. So we found, as described in the country reports and in the EU report, that across all countries, basically, okay, the governments introduced, or the parliament, depending, for instance, in Germany, it was the parliament, introduced state of emergency provisions, basically enabling public authorities to take swift decision ahead of the pandemic. But what impacted most cross-border movements was the closure of borders and limitations to cross-border movements. First of all, we can see that these limitations usually were linked with quarantine, so 14 days quarantine upon entry, with exemptions. Nevertheless, this exemption targeted mostly cross-border workers. We have some examples here, like in Germany, exceptions were for commuters or truck drivers. In Italy, they were specifically for cross-border workers or for workers entering for very short periods. An exception was Portugal, where exception targeted specific countries like Brazil, Argentina, countries where there were large communities of Portuguese workers abroad. So the idea was to enable them to come back home or reunify with their family in such a period. This meant that posted workers were often excluded from this exemption, and we'll see the consequences later on. Nevertheless, construction, whereas of course another main measure introduced across the countries were the lockdown in different shapes, but mostly blocking also some economic activities. In all the countries, construction activities were not formally affected by lockdowns, but in Italy and in Spain, where some closures occurred for short periods. Nevertheless, as we can see from the Eurostat data on working hours in construction, except for Poland, all the countries experienced a dip in the working hours during the first peak of the pandemic, basically. So even in countries where the construction was formally enabled to prosecute activities, and actually, like in Germany and in Romania, the government pledged construction works to go ahead to prosecute, there were difficulties in receiving materials in time, so prolongation of works, closure of sites because of COVID-19 cases, difficulties in having enough workforce because the borders were closed, so migrants and posted workers could not join. So anyhow, construction was affected. Nevertheless, you can see that the dip is actually based only on the second quarter of 2020, and there was a sudden reprise, also because in many countries the construction sector is experiencing a significant growth fueled also by public incentives. So how does this reverberate on posting? It's difficult to say so because we have basically two sources of information, sources from the A1 form and sources from the national declaration. On the one side, we have information from the Social Security Coordination, and on the other side from the National Declaration on Posting introduced pursuant to the Enforcement Directive. Nevertheless, they are hard to compare, and in sometimes there are really huge differences between the numbers from one and the other source. On the top of that, data are not always disaggregated at sectoral level. So we have some examples from Germany, for instance, where we have access to this data, also thanks to Sorabau, and we saw that there was a drop by 4% in workers posted to the country in 2020, partially recovered in 2021. We had similar findings also in Spain, with a drop in 2020 and the recovery in 2021, and a drop which was, for what concerns workers posted from the country, less marked in construction than in other sectors. So among, again, the main initial questions of the project were to understand difficulties experienced by construction companies and workers, more specifically to addressing topics of interest for those having an international activities. So okay, we are aware in all countries, but in Romania, first of all, there were guidelines, protocols drafted with the involvement or directly by social partners, adapting actually measures to prevent and tackle COVID-19 to the specificity on construction sites. At the beginning, of course, it was nevertheless difficult for companies to comply with this protocol. So across all countries now, we had also via interviews we implemented with companies, this was a common finding. Over the long term, of course, this seemed not that much to be a problem, even if, as specified in the report, you can see that we have different views depending from the country on the actual measures entailed by these protocols, which were hard to comply with or simply not observed. Among the most common faults, there were, and difficulties actually for companies, there were the possibility to find adequate accommodation. So it was necessary to accommodate workers separately. Nevertheless, the sector peaked after the first lockdown, so peaked in May, June, July 2020. And at that point, people were finally able to get some holidays. So it was difficult, especially like in Portugal, in Italy, for instance, to find enough accommodation. Another problem concerned access to information, not only because of frequent changes of legislation, of emergency provisions, but also because there were not tools for them, especially at the beginning, for companies to know which were the restrictions maybe in the bordering country, for instance, or in countries where they were posting workers to. For what concerned information, for what concerned workers, also from their side, there were information gaps. Even if we have spotted many good examples also implemented by social partners to provide information in an easy way, like using pictures, for instance, or in different languages, at least concerning HOSH measures. From their side also, there were denouncements on the poor adjustment of accommodation and transport condition, especially on the former. So in that case, whereas from the company side, difficulties have been experienced here, we have also cases basically of exploitation, which were denounced in Romania, in Germany, for instance, in some cases of very poor accommodation, so with little if none improvement compared to the conditions before the pandemic. I mentioned before about the restrictions. Restrictions to cross-border travels meant also that workers had to quarantine 14 days, usually, when coming back home, think about Christmas holidays, and 14 days when coming back to the host country. So basically little breaks were impossible to do, and this meant they couldn't basically move for short periods as they used to, those posted workers which stays abroad for some months actually. And in some countries, stakeholders denounced this led also to psychological problems because the isolation was worsened, but was worse for them compared to other people living the same situation. Among other usual limits and difficulties for posted workers, we have seen some unclarity in the cost coverage of tests, and limits in the adequacy of social protection, meaning that they were either covered by the sending country in case, for instance, of quarantine, sickness, short-time work schemes, which could have much lower protection, or even banned from accessing these benefits, as it was the case for Italy, because there were restrictions in access to quarantine benefits and short-time work schemes for workers posted from Italy and staying abroad. Finally, we have seen also some problems in access to vaccines, because the vaccination campaign were formally universal. Nevertheless, in some countries, there were procedural restrictions requiring basically workers to be registered at the National Health Service, which is not necessarily the case for posted workers. And also, as in Hungary, for instance, and in other Central Eastern European countries, Sputnik or Sinovac vaccines were used. They were not always recognized, actually, almost never recognized. And this was a problem when they had to travel, and vaccination was required as a proof, or even when, in order to work, you need to have a vaccine. For instance, this was addressed in Italy quite late, actually, by making an exception for workers of San Marino, because San Marino used Sputnik, and by enabling workers to be considered as vaccinated as long as they had a booster dose with an authorized vaccine. I mentioned before problems in access to information. We have also some good practices, some examples. This is, for instance, a poster made by the sectoral paritarian funds in Italy in Albanian language, and it was made in about 8-10 languages, using as well pictorial language in order to be easy to understand. And those posters were disseminated and also used at the end, in Italian in that case, used at the entrance of construction site. That's another example from Romania. Actually, in Romania, we have seen larger gaps because we couldn't find, at least officially, posters or materials developed in languages other than Romanian, concerning, of course, measures to tackle COVID-19. Nevertheless, for instance, public authorities made posters also concerning not only work, but also behaviors to keep in other circumstances. Here you have an example about behavior to keep when shopping. And also now using a similar approach. More quickly to correct the recommendation, also to leave room for some questions, and stating they are not all the recommendation. We have shared a draft internally, which is still to be implemented, and which include other aspects that I did not mention today, not to, provide too much information on time. So I will focus on information concerning information measures and aspects concerning health and social protection of posted workers. For what concerns information measures, following also the experience of HOSH protocols in general, but especially in the construction sector, which we found across most countries. Of course, as a partnership, we are proposing not to adequately involve social partners in the design and rollout of emergency provisions in case of future pandemics. Rollout means also actually keep them informed whenever some restrictions are updated or are introduced at national level, because they can be a powerful channel also to inform workers and employers, and this in part was lacking during the pandemic. At the same time, we've seen much confusion. I've said before, now that many companies could not really understand which information, which restrictions were in place abroad. In some cases, the same applied also for restrictions within the country, because there might have been different sources of information, or because restrictions were different depending from region to region. So, of course, we are not here to discuss about whether the state of the regions or the federal state shall be responsible for issuing health emergency provision, because that's a matter, of course, outside the scope of our project. Nevertheless, at least using homogeneous standards for information to be comparable across different sources, and have a single entry point at national level, like done, for instance, in Europe with the Reopen EU portal, could help citizens to navigate across the different sources of information and to understand a bit better which registrations are in place in the different areas of the countries. Again, about information, we had a nice and interesting example from Germany, also to address these gaps. The states of North Rhine-Westphalia and Lower Saxony and the embassies of Germany from bordering countries, or in the northwest with Belgium and Netherlands, established a cross-border working group to share information on restrictions available and also adjust from the German side restrictions in order to prevent short circuits between rules in place in these countries and on the other side of the border, and also this way to keep more easily German citizens informed about how to move across the border safely. For what concerns mobility and protection of workers, as suggested by the European Commission at the beginning of the pandemic and actually done by Italian authorities, we suggest to establish some flexible rules on the duration of A1 forms at the time mobility is blocked. So we know that there are restrictions to mobility, if there are quarantine obligations, so the case might be that works are prolonged and that posted workers are forced to stay in the country. So even if the A1 form is expiring, maybe there should be some flexibility to consider it still valid. At the same time, some relaxation of rules could occur for posted workers in order to prevent them from doing double quarantine during short breaks. Of course, we are very cautious on that because depending on situations, there could be health situations which are particularly at risk in some countries. So we understand that this is a quite difficult topic to tackle. Nevertheless, probably it was at the same time they should be not fully prevented from coming back home for short periods as long as possible. At the same time, we propose to ensure access to testing and personal protective equipment like gloves and masks by workers. This was sometimes set out in protocols, stating that it was a responsibility of the employers to provide that. This was not always provided. There are also cost issues here because tests in some countries costed a couple of euros, in some others even 100 euros. So of course this shall be sided with subsidies on the side of the state to avoid that the companies in the end provide like a social shock absorber bears the full cost of tests maybe on a frequent basis. The case, nevertheless, across the project was more on implementing this point than about 40s in the legislation and in protocol themselves. So this is why we should ensure also prosecution of inspection and visit by Italian OSH committees, as it happened in Spain during the pandemic. And we are proposing also to make social partners aware of contact person designed in case of posting. This is a provision of the enforcement directive. Actually, the enforcement directive entails that sending undertaking appoints, member states can require sending undertakings to appoint a contact person for social partners to engage in collective bargaining. We have run an experiment because our idea was to test during the project, even though they replied to the request by social partners. So we approached the unions in some covered countries and we tried to have access to this data. This was impossible. So if this is to have some effects, social partners or at least unions shall be informed of who are the sending undertaking and who is the contact person. So they can contact them and also check if they are sticking to collective agreements whenever they are applicable and possibly enter into additional collective bargaining. About vaccines, we propose basically to grant access via the European Health Insurance Card, which has an identifying number. So of course, this would require some coordination at the EU level, but as said, in some cases, posting can last for 4, 5, 6 months. And I mean, in times like the one we have experienced it might mean to have a significant protection gap if you're not able to access vaccines during that time. And finally, we propose to overcome a little bit difficulties in accessing short-time work scheme, quarantine benefits, etc., not only by making sure that posted workers can access them in the sending country, as this was not always the case, but also reaching some level of harmonization. So in that respect, probably a directive, at least upholstering better standards in terms of protection in case of downtown. So basically, I'm talking about improving existing or introducing new short-time work schemes could help to prevent inadequate coverage in the future. Thank you, Giuseppe. You can find more attention and all the audience, of course. You can find more information in the handbook at the project website, and I'm here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Feliciano. Yeah, maybe we can also share the link in the chat of the handbook, so it would be accessible for everyone. Thank you very much for your presentations. I'm happy now to move to our discussion with social partners. So I would like to welcome Christine Leforestier, Director for Social Affairs at the European Confederation of European Industry Confederation in the construction sectors, and Joachim Smedman, Advisor at the European Trade Union Confederation. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. And yeah, just maybe to start and break the ice, I would like to ask you if you have any preliminary remark or general comment on what Feliciano presented.
Should start.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Yeah, we can start with you, Christine, maybe.
Yes, as a preliminary remark, I would like to thank Feliciano for this work, because I see and I understand that it's not very easy to gather relevant information. We can remember how the situation was confusing at the time, and now it's good that we start having this kind of reflection on what happened, but I see that it's not that easy indeed to collect the relevant information and put it in a way that it's meaningful. So thank you very much. And basically, from what I know, at least, I think that you touched upon the main things that happened during that time and the main problems. So I also had a quick look at your draft study and recommendations, and my first impression is that it's quite, considering the difficulty around the issue, it touched upon the main points, and it's quite comprehensive. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Christine. Joachim.
Thank you. Good afternoon also from my side. No, as Christine already said, I think the challenges and the experiences highlighted by Feliciano very much also resonates with the observations we at the European Trade Union Confederation made together with our affiliates during the height of the pandemic. And I would say even beyond the construction sector at DTUC, where of course across industry, sectorial social partner organization. So I mean, we have not only as our members EFBWW from the construction sector, but EFAT from agriculture. So I think many of these challenges really show on the one hand that like what we would call mobile workers, so not only posted but also, for example, front chair and seasonal workers are quite vulnerable. The EU framework tends to work in terms of normality, but then in terms of crisis, people having exercised their freedom of movement in the pandemic, they were easily left behind, and this is what we really have to reflect upon today and the way forward. How do we prevent this from happening? Because not only should I say that those challenges that arose were in any way new? Also, I mean, they were there before, but they came out in a much stronger light as a result of the pandemic. But also showing that these workers are not only vulnerable, but also quite often essential. Our markets today are quite integrated already, and mobile workers play an important role when it comes to food security or logistics, infrastructure. So I think the findings highlight many of these issues, perhaps, and what we will also discuss today in particular is of course that, let's say, posted workers have some specificities because they are affiliated, for example, to the Social Security or their sending member state, so to say, whereas that is not the case for example, seasonal workers. So that also brings additional challenges to posted workers, which are quite prominent in the construction sector, indeed.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Joachim. So yeah, I think we'll have the chance to touch upon all these points that you mentioned during this discussion. But just to start, we have seen that one of the elements of the EU report was, for example, that we had in different member states was were the occupational health and safety protocols. Actually, can you do you had any experience or anything to report on these protocols, and especially on the point how these protocols were able, and if they were able, to guarantee a good balance between workers' health and safety on the workplace, as well as to guarantee continuity in production? Maybe we can start with you, Joachim.
Thank you. I promised I would comment a little bit more broadly on this question,
sure,
and
sure.
perhaps Christine can then follow up more from a sectorial point of view. But what I can indeed confirm is that in many sectors at national level, social partners played a key role in developing these kind of guidelines or protocols for sectorial for COVID and health and safety at work, either bilaterally or tripart protocols together with authorities, which not only showed the importance of social partner involvement in the sense of being quite quick to react. I mean, social partners can be quite agile on the ground. We don't have to go through a legislative process, for example, and it's really tailored to the needs of workers and employers as well. And then in terms of practical implementations, if the social partners are involved already in the design and the rollout, we also see stronger compliance, stronger feeling of a shared ownership and commitment. So I'm sure Christine can say give a few more concrete examples than me, perhaps, from the sector.
Yeah, thank you, Joachim. I can very much confirm what you said. We have seen from the very beginning of the pandemic that there was a strong willingness from social partners, and indeed sometimes together with the relevant administration to create this kind of protocols. So for me, it's a very positive and strong signal that the reaction has been very rapid, and indeed the willingness really came from both sides of social partners to the benefit of all, and indeed in many countries supported by the administration. So meaning that the idea was really to see how we can continue the activity in order not to kill the market and not to kill jobs, but doing it really in the best possible conditions to make sure that the workers are safe while continuing the activity. So at the FIAC level, we have tried to help a bit with that. Of course, it was national initiatives, but we have collected the information sent by our member federations and shared it to the others, because we had at that time a lot of questions from our members who were asking, okay, how is it done in the other countries? What is the content? How does it do that? How do they organize? So I think it was very useful for them to share information on how it was created in the neighboring countries. And at our level as well, FIEC and EFBWW came together to do a joint statement. It was not a protocol in itself, of course, because it was not our task to give the guidelines and rules for this kind of protocols. But at least we provided a joint statement already in April 2020, so quite early as well, on what we consider to be the conditions to continue the activity, and with a request to national authorities to do their best to continue the activity, but also setting a number of criteria that we consider very important to ensure the safety of the workers, also taking into consideration the transportation, the accommodation, how they could do to return home if they wish to return home. But yeah, and in amongst others, regarding our requests, in terms of activity, we also put a point on the fact that it would be important that social partners at national level can agree on temporary unemployment measures together with the relevant administration when necessary. So it was quite comprehensive. I will put the link of this joint statement in the chat as well. So voila, this is what I can say from these protocols.
No, that was very interesting, and also remarked what we understood from the pandemic, that actually it was a laboratory to make this exercise of collaboration, cooperation between member states, also as we have seen in the construction sector. And I think also construction sector is a very interesting example, because it's one of the few sectors that actually continued to work during the pandemic. So once that now we have mentioned the protocols, health and safety protocols, we can also mention something about health and safety information, which is also a very important, were a very important topic during the pandemic. I would like to ask you actually if you had any experience to report, of course, Joachim more at general level, and Christine from the construction sector point of view, in relation to the accessibility of health and safety information for workers. Which was the experience of workers and the experience as well of companies, and also if you have any specific recommendation to stimulate the policy discussion on this point. So I give the floor to you, Joachim.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was thinking about this point when preparing for today, and I broadly created three kind of categories of information that posted workers needed, but perhaps also struggled to obtain during the pandemic. And first of all, on the border crossings, what were the requirements to travel from one country to another, in terms of quarantine, testing, vaccination, etc. Secondly, the health and safety regulations in the workplace. What are the protocols in place? What is the equipment I should be using, or the different ways of organizing the work in the workplace to conduct it in a safe way? And thirdly, also how and where to seek health care in the host member state in case I fall sick, or whether there is or not a possibility to also have a vaccination or a booster dose in that country, or do I have to return back to the country where my member state of origin to go through possible quarantines again, and so on. And of course, as the pandemic evolved, these types of information were quite rapidly changing also, which made it difficult for workers to access information that was accurate and up to date, not to speak the least about the border crossings, for example, and also for social partners, worker, trade unions, employers organizations, when it was quite challenging indeed to not only get hold of the information ourselves, but also then to disseminate them further to the workers and companies on the ground. But overall, I think both sides of industry still played a key role in actually trying to disseminate this information further to workers and employers. So looking back, not only should perhaps authorities in the member state have relied more on consulting social partners when elaborating these measures, but also in terms of using the social partners to actually disseminate this information to make sure that it reaches those concerned. Then in terms of lockdowns, not only did labor inspectors struggle to have access to workplaces, but also trade unions where our member organizations tried. They could not reach the workers, or they were prevented from having access to the workplaces to verify where the rules were respected, or even to promote to provide relevant information. And of course, when it comes to information, and we're talking about mobile workers coming from other member states, language is always an issue. Information in the local language of the host member state is not always enough. Sometimes English is not always enough. And even if you have, let's say, a poster in the coffee room in the work site, even though the information is there, it is perhaps not always enough if the workers are not adequately trained on what this information means in practice, what is the safety procedure, the personal protective equipment that should be used, how the work should be organized, because some, let's say, how do you say, elements of the work, actually, in order to do it in a safe way, it might take more time than it usually takes. You cannot stand too close to each other, or and so forth. So also, indeed, it's not only enough to train and provide information, but also consider how work is organized so that the necessary time is allowed, because sometimes also due to high work pressure, it was very difficult for workers to respect the OSH rules in place in the workplace, even though they knew about them. So I mean, that's also something to bear in mind.
Thank you very much, Joachim. That was very, very interesting. Also, you provided a very interesting pictures of the situation, touching all the important points. I would like to ask Christine if you have any specific experience from the construction sector on this point.
Yes, thank you. I think one very important element that Joachim mentioned is the rapidity of the changing environment during that time. So communication and information was a challenge in general for everybody at all levels. So this is one very important aspect to take into account, but he's right to mention that there were, there are challenges in general, but they were increased in this situation. And also he mentioned the fact that, of course, language is usually a challenge when we talk about mobile workers, posted workers. And it could be even more than in this case, where everything was a bit confusing. So my understanding is that there are countries where they are used to host a community of certain national workers. And I think that in those countries, they are more used to translate a number of information and indications in the language of the national workers. So this is one thing. Then, of course, we're speaking of a very fragmented industry. It's composed mainly of SMEs, but you have a number of companies used to also host workers from abroad who are developing their messages and information in different languages. And beyond that, I would say most of them try to communicate even more when it gets to OSH practices through pictures as much as possible. Okay, maybe with pictures you cannot say as much as you would say with sentences and words, but still this is one thing that we see in many construction companies, because they know that their workers do not all speak the language of the host country, or maybe a little bit, but not sufficiently. Some of them also even have some difficulties to read simply, but this is also a fact. So clearly developing communication via pictures is a good idea. It is something different, of course, but it's still related to the health and safety matters. This is the approach we took in one of our EU-funded projects together with EFBWW, namely on silica and adopting best practices to work in an environment with silica dust. We really developed this kind of guide with pictures showing what are the good and bad practices. So this is not something new, but this is something that we should promote even more in our sector.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yeah, I think that pictures is a very good example and also a very useful tool, but I think also that it should be complemented with trainings on health and safety on the workplace. I see Joachim, yeah.
Yes,
please.
if I may add one point
Sure.
on the access to information on health and safety, and which I believe is particularly relevant also for the construction sector, is of course that we quite often have, although there's a lot of SMEs, we nevertheless have quite big work sites. Because there's subcontracting chains in one and the same workplace. It can be horizontally or vertically. And there, of course, what is key is who provides the information to whom, and that the information is somehow streamlined and that everyone is aware, and regardless of the language they speak, or even if in practice they nevertheless work together. And I mean, on the one hand, we have the posting of workers directive that indicates that the employer should guarantee the occupational health, safety, and hygiene of the posted workers on the basis of the principle of equal treatment. On the other hand, we have, for example, the framework directive on health and safety that also indicates that the main contractor can in a work site can sometimes be held liable for ensuring the health and safety of all the workers present on that contract work site. So in that case also ensuring that everyone has access to information can indeed sometimes also require some coordination within one and the same work site when it comes to subcontracting.
Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, Joachim. We know that there is this problem also of subcontracting in the construction sector that doesn't make the things easier sometimes. I don't know if Christine, you would like to add anything else on this point, because otherwise we can also discuss the other major element that we found in the EU handbook. So from one side, we had health and safety at work. From the other side, posted workers affected also difficulties in accessing social protection when posted abroad. This, for example, due to also the periods of inactivities that could be for the quarantine, mandatory quarantine when entering, when crossing a border for enter or leave the country of the posting, but also in case there was an actual case of COVID infection. So, do you have any remarks or perspective from both the trade unions or employer point of view on these difficulties, and especially in relation both to the period of inactivity, but also in the, if you are aware of difficulties of workers in accessing social protection because of the misrecognition of the disease status, of the sickness status, because of COVID-19, and if also short-term work schemes were used by employers to cover this period. I know it's a very specific questions, but we face we found this during our research. I don't know if you have any comment or anything to report on this point. Thank you. We can start always with you, Joachim.
Okay, I'm not sure I have an answer to all of your questions, and
no, we are discussing, so no worries.
No, and I thought my contribution would be perhaps more of a kind of showing where the problem is rather than delivering actual solutions, because it kind of partly stems from the fact that, as I previously also alluded to, that posted workers are, on the one hand, affiliated to the social security systems of the sending member state, for example, when it comes to sickness and unemployment benefits. Whereas, on the other hand, the hard nucleus of rights, as we call it, guaranteed by the 2018 Posting of Workers Directive does not, for example, cover sick pay. So already here, there's some kind of discrepancy. Then looking at what happened during the pandemic with border closures and a lack of coordination between member states, a lack of mutual recognition, also created like legal certainty then, like how to apply the sick pay versus sickness benefits, so to say, and depending on whether the quarantine was imposed upon arrival by the host member state or upon return by the member state of origin when the worker comes back after the posting mission has ended, or in the middle over Christmas, or to take a vaccine or so. So really here, the posted workers sometimes experience quite a lot of legal uncertainty, but also employers in relation to questions such as whether and how they would be compensated in case they ended up in quarantine. Would that count as sick leave, or would it be covered by some temporary unemployment measure benefit? And if so, depending on the one or the other, would it be compensated by the employer as sick pay, or by the state? And if so, the sending or the receiving state, depending on who had imposed the quarantine. I mean, these kind of legal certainty even made also, for example, when it comes to issues, some simple issues such as calling in sick, once again afraid of ending up in a quarantine that lasts longer than the actual sickness that you're tied to bed, so to say. Like, if the worker doesn't know how he or she will be paid, if so, and by whom, there is a chance that you show up sick to work if you feel that it's not that bad. Because I mean, in many cases, we also know that people who had COVID did not have very severe symptoms. So on the one hand, there was this uncertainty of workers: will they be paid, or should they take the risk of showing up sick to work? And on the side of the employers also, finding improvised solutions where in the legal gray zone, such as organizing the work in teams so that posted workers who were quarantining together stayed in the same accommodation together, work in the same shifts all together, so that they could work in a shift while they were quarantining, so to say, without being in contact with other workers. And this is perhaps not the best way to proceed either, but we saw a lot of legal uncertainty on both sides of employers and workers. And final point, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, many posted workers remained stranded in the host member states, even though their posting mission was perhaps terminated. And then they struggled to access social protection benefits remotely, either because they could not claim them digitally or because their member states of origin required them to be present on that territory, but they were not because they were still in the host member state.
Thank you, Joachim. And yeah, I've seen you mentioned also the 2018 directive on posting of workers, and also you mentioned remuneration. So you know that in the 2018 directive was also mentioned the principle of equal remuneration. Do you think that actually the pandemic harmed this principle, the effectiveness of the principle of equal remuneration?
I would not say that the pandemic undermined this principle. What it did was that it showed that the principle is not watertight, or that the directive as it has been designed with the overarching principle of equal pay for equal work in the same place is not fireproof, so to say. And I mean, we had examples such as someone, maybe Feliciano earlier mentioned in his presentation, that sometimes we had discussions of whether costs of COVID tests should be covered by either or they had to be paid by the worker, but should actually have been covered by the employer, for example, if it's a posting mission and you're traveling in a professional context. For us, it's quite clear that should be covered by the employer. But I think a more telling example is actually the fact that I'm risks being a little bit legalistic perhaps, but the level of remuneration as guaranteed by the Posting of Workers Directive from 2018 doesn't really look so much at how this remuneration level is reached to match the wage level of the host country. So in practice, what happens is that often a big part of the remuneration that the posted workers receives in the host member state is made up of different kind of tax-free posting allowances rather than actual taxable gross wage. But I mean, for the worker, it makes the same as long as we are not hit by a crisis. But at the moment the crisis hit, what happened to these posted workers who had like half of their salary paid in terms of tax-free posting allowances was that their unemployment benefits were nevertheless calculated on the much lower taxable gross wage from their that they had originally, so to say, or should have had or would have had in the sending member state. So all of a sudden their unemployment benefits did not, so to say, match the level of equal pay that they were receiving in the member state, the host member state.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Now I move to you, Christine, if you have any remarks from the perspective of employers on social protection accessibility problems.
Well, I will not enter into a very technical discussion launched by Joachim on remuneration. Here, I think it's separate from the COVID crisis in itself. I mean, but regarding the social protection and disruptions in social protection during the COVID crisis, I believe indeed that there were a lot of gray zones at the time, both for employers and workers. So in principle, we could say that posted workers, in any case, should be covered by the posting legislation and social security legislation, so that there should not be any problem. But as Feliciano reported, in his presentation, I understand that there has been unclarities and problems to have the health state of workers sometimes recognized by the sending country. So I understand it was complicated. But otherwise, I believe that there has had a number of cases where at the end of their posting period, workers maybe remain stuck in the host country without having the possibility to return already to their home country. And here again, that you have this gray zone where you're a bit in a no man's land in terms of legislative coverage. So I can observe that and understand that there has been this kind of difficulties. Now I will also not be able to come with concrete solutions today. I think it's too complex now, but this is certainly something to be looked at for maybe, I would not say the same exact situation, but similar situation where we should think at alternative and better solution. When it comes to quarantines, yeah, basically we discussed about two different things. We discussed about quarantines for sick workers and preventive quarantines, basically. Of course, I can only understand what Joachim said about quarantines for sick workers, because then there were a number of issues regarding the accommodation and regarding the fact that the workers maybe indeed were wondering, okay, who will pay me during that time? So I'd rather work without saying anything. I must say that I have not received much feedback on this situation. We received more calls regarding the preventive mandatory quarantine when posted workers were crossing the border to go on to their place of work. And here, both parties, employer and workers, were reporting the waste of time and money for them to be stuck like this. So this one, for instance, one of our recommendations in our joint paper with EFBWW, to say, well, for those workers having no symptoms or nothing, then they should be authorized to work, especially if they go to work on important projects. But this is a little bit difficult to go into much more detail, especially in terms of solutions. But we recognize that there are a number of unclarities and gray zones in this respect that should be further looked at.
Thank you very much, Christine. So we can move now to actually a digital tool which the European Commission is developing, and actually can be also in future, when it will be totally developed, a solution to these problems that we just have seen in terms, especially in terms of social security, which is the European Social Security Pass. We know about this huge project from the European Commission. It aims, first of all, to introduce A1 certificates to guarantee, to focus on A1 certificates, so on the mobility abroad of workers. Do you think, of course, this is, what do you think about this pilot project that the Commission is leading, and which other features would you include in this digital tool to guarantee fair mobility of workers in the European Union? Maybe, yeah, we can start with you, Joachim.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think we at DTUC take an active interest in this pilot project run by the Commission, in the sense that already, let's say, during the second phase of the COVID pandemic, we saw the development of the EU COVID certificate. which of course facilitated travel for both professional and private reasons, and that we can also draw some lessons from, because also as a more general remark, when it comes to labor mobility in the EU, we need to improve cross-border cooperation, be it in terms of information provision, be it in terms of cross-border enforcement. This is, of course, also why the European Labour Authority has been put in place. But as demonstrated by the COVID pandemic, digitalization in itself has a huge potential in facilitating these issues, improving social security coordination more generally. So it would indeed be a missed opportunity, let's say, not to explore what the S-Pass, the Social Security Pass, can bring. And I would say, in terms of features, not only when it comes to portability of rights and verification of social security credential for workers, in terms of being aware about your rights, but also very much as an enforcement tool for labor inspectors to ensure the identification of the worker and the verification of their social security status and contributions, because this is important to not only facilitate free movement, but also to tackle social fraud and abuse, we believe. And once again, in terms of features at DTUC, we don't believe that it can be as simple, let's say, as the COVID certificate, that you just scan a QR code and it turns either red or green, saying the worker is covered or not covered by Social Security in the sending member state. It also needs to allow inspectors to verify that the information declared corresponds to reality, because this is key, for example, to tackle bogus postings or posting of bogus self-employed. I mean, if the person in the sending member state is declared as self-employed in the social security system of the sending member state, that certificate, if scanned, would turn green, so to say. But in reality, if the person is bogus posted, although he or she is covered under the wrong status. Similarly, in terms of bogus posting, what I mean is that if someone is affiliated to the social security system of the sending member state the day before they are posted, there's a high likelihood that that is not a genuine posting situation, because the legal definition of posting is working for a limited period of time somewhere else than where you normally work. If you were affiliated to Social Security the day before you were posted, it's not always the habitual place of work. So in that sense, we believe that this S-Pass needs to provide a little bit more information than, so to say, a green or a red light when you scan it.
Very explicative. Thank you very much, Joachim. Christine, what the employer's point of view?
Yeah. So regarding the S-Pass project from the European Commission, we think that it's an interesting project indeed. We try to follow the developments, and we're curious about the outcomes, of course. However, I have the impression that the Commission is quite discreet about this project. I know that the takeoff has been a bit difficult with Italy being involved as a leader. But we understood that it took several months before another group of countries really accepted to participate in this pilot. So we did not hear a lot of enthusiasm from the member states, but for the reasons developed by Joachim, we believe that there is something to do in this field, and it could certainly have an added value. Especially in the construction sector. And in particular, it could be a way of kind of circumventing the current frozen situation as regard the revision of the legislation on the coordination of social security. Yep. We have been waiting for a long time, hoping that we would finally come to a deal. We have seen that already at least 2 deals have failed. And now it's in a standstill again. So at least if something can move forward via very concrete application, a very concrete project, then it could certainly be helpful. And otherwise, and in any case, well, we support a strong A1 or a strong digital solution in our sector. In parallel to this, in the construction sector, we are working more specifically on the issue of social ID cards, because this is a tool which has been developed in a lot of European countries by the social partners in most cases. And so that we understand that this is really something which is helpful for a sector to tackle fraud, to increase transparency, to help the sector also in general terms. So now we have submitted a project to the European Commission to work on that, to map all the existing social ID cards in the construction sector, and to see how we could have an interconnection scheme for these existing cards, and to see whether there are some loopholes in a possible EU framework. We would not like to have a top-down approach in this field. There has been some initiatives from the European Commission in the past that we have refused, both from the employers and trade union sides, because it was not adapted to our needs. But we would very much like to promote a bottom-up approach, building on the existing, and see how to build on that to have an EU framework potentially.
Thank you very much, Christine. Really, thank you much. You both provided a very interesting pictures. I think we covered all the topics that were also mentioned in this in the EU handbook. So thank you very much. Before closing this discussion, I would like to ask for you for a final general comment, a main takeaway of the discussion of everything that was said before. If you have any recommendation or highlight from this discussion.
May I start?
Thank you very much, Joachim.
Yes, I think that, as I said in the beginning, what is for us nothing new, but was really highlighted by the pandemic and even made even more severe is that these workers are very vulnerable, but not always adequately protected, but still make an important contribution to the EU in internal market. So we must make sure to not leave these workers behind as a result of them having exercised their freedom of movement. I mean, it's important that the EU makes sure that these workers are protected, not only in terms of normality, but also in terms of crisis, so to say. And the point I would like to make here as a takeaway or the way forward is perhaps to also reflect a little bit on the recent proposal by the European Commission for a single market emergency instrument. Mm-hmm. Yep. As presented by the Commission in September this year, and which will now, of course, be discussed by the EU co-legislators, because this crisis preparedness and contingency measure framework the idea is to be able to trigger it in case of any future crisis. We don't know what that kind of crisis would look like. Would it be public health or something else? So I mean, it's a quite general framework, but that also has articles linked to exactly the restrictions around free movement of workers, and the free provision of services in the internal market, for example. So I mean, it's very important that these lessons learned that we discuss now, not beyond social protection, are taken into consideration when discussing this instrument. And I will just mention two aspects. One is the concept of essential work, essential worker, essential sector. That is, of course, crisis relevant. In the context of COVID, of course, it was very clear that a healthcare worker, we have many frontier workers who live in one country and work in another in the healthcare sector, for example, but not so many posted workers, for example. But still, the member states had very different definition of what they understood as crisis relevant services or sectors or workers. So there needs to be also better coordination about those for whom and under what conditions do we have exemption, for example, from quarantine rules. Because, for example, healthcare workers during COVID were exempted, but if posted workers were to send on a mission to another member state to repair a machine in a hospital, they were not necessarily able to pursue that mission. So I think a more coordinated understanding of crisis relevant services and workers and sectors will be key for this single market emergency instrument. And second, final point from my side, the involvement of social partners when it comes to and this is also for the SME, the single market emergency instrument, that it needs to be reflected in there. In consulting social partners on the measures put in place when it comes to issues linked to free movement of workers and services in the internal market, and also their dissemination on the ground. So I'll conclude by those words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. I give the floor to you, Christine.
Yes, indeed, I believe that in similar situations, it would be good to have an even better coordination. We know that the European Commission did its best, I think, to coordinate the various measures at its level, but a lot of confusion, I think, and clarity came from the fact that member states suddenly decided to do their own took their own measures. Of course, they could, but it was not very helpful. And also these measures changed a lot very rapidly, being often not that clear. So if we can indeed have this kind of instrument helping for better overall coordination in future similar situation, it would be very helpful. Also, I believe that in exceptional circumstances like a pandemic, where there is really a force majeure, we would really recommend avoiding that workers end up in gray zones, as we have discussed earlier. So I see that there was this idea promoted in the recommendations by Feliciano that the A1 forms should be extended, and also the permit of stay should be extended as well for third country nationals. So for me, it seems to be quite a good idea, because then we would indeed avoid some situations where workers end up in gray zones. Of course, this should be done under quite strict conditions, because we know that our sector is sometimes prone to abuse. So, well, there should be some flexibility here in very specific circumstances. Otherwise, yes, I'm looking forward to read the final report of this study and the recommendations, because I believe there are a number of points that we will be able to take from that, also for future activities at the EU level in this field. So
sure, it will be sent promptly. as soon as ready. Thank you very much, Christine. And thanks also to you, Joachim. It will be also maybe interesting to hear in a while, in a few minutes, from participants if they would like to add anything. We also have a wrap-up session with Lisa Dornberger from the German Paritarian Social Protection Fund in the construction sector, who will provide both the point of view of the paritarian sector, but also a quick wrap-up session, which will be also useful for discussion with the participants. But before starting, I also see with pleasure that Jean-Baptiste Boeri from the European Commission, actually the unit A1 on labor mobility from DG Employment, was able to join us. Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste, to be here. I don't know if you have already any remark, or we can also discuss them later after Lisa's point.
Yes. Hello.
Hello, Jean-Baptiste. Thank you very much.
I missed all the first part because I'm really in between meeting right now, so I'm really sorry.
No worries at all.
I only caught the end of Joachim and Christine discussion, so I'm a bit sorry. So I don't have really any input right now.
So yeah, maybe we can check later after the wrap-up session if there is anything.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm not sure because I have to go in a few minutes. So I'm really sorry. I try to be
No
there.
worries at all. No worries at all, Jean-Baptiste. And thanks again for joining. Of course, yeah, we will share again also with you the final handbook and also the final report. And so I can give the floor to Lisa.
Thank you, Giuseppe. And thank you to the speakers, first of all, for the very insightful speeches. I think it gave us a broader understanding of the situation, especially touching the different topics from the OSH issues, which were obviously very important during the pandemic, but also touching the topic of equal remuneration and the ESPAS project. And I thought, listening to you, it represented very well the complexity of the posted workers situation and also of the posting employer situation. That was also a challenge for us in the EMEcs project. And I think we can all agree, and I heard it from Joachim and Christine throughout the discussion very well, that of course the posting workers and also the posting employers sometimes are a vulnerable group, but also the experience has changed so much. So we couldn't, during the project, we couldn't have just one path to follow because it depended on so many factors what the posting experience was. Obviously, it depended on the country they were posting from or to as well. And also, like Christine said, I think it depended on the size of the company, what the company was able to provide for their workers, and also the changing of the regulation, which was the case. So unfortunately, there is not such a group as just the posting workers. They experience very different things while posting. So it was very difficult to find the problems for all of them. But I think Joachim and Christine said so many things, and so many things we also discussed in our EMEcs project. And so I just take my few minutes to highlight two more measures or two more challenges that, because like Giuseppe said, I wanted to highlight also a little bit the perspective of Socabao. And what we can say, and what you all agreed on, Feliciano as well, the information flow is the most important thing. And especially in problematic times or exceptional times like the pandemic. And this is, of course, we have always the problem with the language. You highlighted this already. And with the information, where is the information, where we can find it. But we also see as Socabao, I have to say, we have a website with 14 different languages. So I think this is quite luxury. This is not very often the case that information is provided in so many different languages. But we are constantly trying to find easier language to explain everything. And Christine, you highlighted it, like some, as well as in Germany, BG Bau, the professional association for OSH issues in Germany, used pictures to provide information. So they didn't need to translate anything or some things, let's say. But for the legal complex explanations that we wanted to give to the posted workers and the posting employers, it's very difficult to find the easy language. And this is always the criticism that let's say that we should keep in mind to make it as easy as possible on our websites to get the information, because this is the first step. Everybody needs to know which regulation applies. I think we agree all on that. And also, I think in case of information, we think very much about digital solutions and websites that are that are provided by all the member states. Of course, I think this is the basis. But during the pandemic and in the EMEcs project, we also were agreeing on that something like hotlines, like the phone, is very important still, because there are some workers that aren't so in touch with the internet. And we as Soka Bau, we provide also hotlines in 14 languages, and we see that they are used quite often. So we know for Poland and also for Spain that they are also provided stable hotlines, and just to know about the regulations. And I think this is something we should look into more, I think, European-wide, if it's possible. I know it costs resources, but I think information should be available in many different areas and not just the internet. And information-wise, also, I would say the A1 certificate is, and I know this is not the main goal, but the side effect of the A1 certificate could also provide information for the workers themselves. Because we as Soka Bau, in collaboration with the labor inspections, the customs authorities in Germany, we get to know about cases where the workers don't know where they are socially secured, and sometimes if they are socially secured. And I think this is a missing information that they really need to have. And we could use the A1 certificate also as something providing information for them. And we as Soka Bau, I think since 2019, we asked for, and this is a complicated topic, I know, but it would be perfect to use the A1 certificate if it would be an obligation to have at least the application for the A1 certificate prior to the posting. But I know there are bureaucratical obstacles that we need to minimize. But I think this would be very beneficial for the inspections as well. Another point, what we observed in Germany from the perspective of Soka Bau as well, was that it was a challenge to really know about the situation on the construction sites, because the works were ongoing. We never did really stop in general the construction sites, but the inspections were less than before, of course. And so we didn't have this exchange with the customs authorities about inspections, and we didn't have this knowledge that we had before. And for that, we tried in the EMEcs project, and we are not quite at the end, but we tried to approach how can we get a realistic picture of the construction sites without having these inspections at them. And we tried it by being very creative and look at job advertisements to have a little idea about the reality of the market. And also we agreed on that it's very practical to enforce or support more networks who are like consulting networks like Fair Mobility, to empower them to be even more present than they are right now. This were the 2 points. I think the information is very important, and also knowing about the realistic situation on the construction sites, also in exceptional times. And as a summary, I think I can say for all the partners that we learned that we, from the different member states, had quite similar experiences, of course, with similar problems with the accommodation, with transport, with hygienic conditions on the construction site, and also supply bottlenecks. And we also recognized that the national borders were playing a more important role than before. Like Christine also said, this is something that should be solved more on a European level. And so we decided, as for our recommendations, that we only write recommendations for the European legislator on the European level. For a prior project, which was the YES project, we decided to do a national level recommendation set and also European level. And for that, we concentrated on the European level, but because we think the solutions only can be on the European level, not in the national circumstances. So I would really emphasize for solutions on information flow. I really hope that we are getting stronger on that and not losing the track of the realistic situation on the construction sites. And with that said, I thank you for your time and listening, and I give back to the brilliant moderator, Giuseppe.
Too kind. Thank you very much, Lisa. And yeah, so now is the moment of active participation from participants. So let's see if anyone has remarks, comment, or question. You can raise your hand or write in the chat. Also comment in relation to both the panel discussion we had with social partners, or also on the EU handbook itself. I see one question from Poland.
Hello, my name is Michał Kuro. Sorry,
good afternoon.
Without raising a hand, I just typed very fast.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to, it's not more like a question, it's rather a statement. I'd like to inform that Poland has recently introduced a completely electronic process for requesting the PDA1. And I think it's quite an important achievement from our side, because before we introduced electronic issuance of the PDA1, there were only the requests which were electronic. We have a special wizard tool which allows a client to process the request in a step-by-step manner. So it is quite easy to request, but recently we also implemented the issuance in electronic form, which means we are eliminating the papers, right? But aside from this, which already is electronic, the process is already electronic, we also implemented a useful service. It's a checker, you could say. It's an online verification tool, which allows for example, German institution or French, Belgian, those countries to which Polish workers are mostly posted to, right? They can, the inspection services, they can go to our website. If they have the A1 in their hand, they can put the data into this service and check if a certain document, A1 document, is valid or not, or if it was issued by ZUS if it was revoked later. For example, if the posting period was shortened, or maybe during the inspection, it turned out that the conditions for posting are really not meant because, for example, maybe the employer was cheating on us and was providing us with inadequate information. So I think this is a useful tool because it helps the receiving countries, their services, their inspection services, to quickly target the fraud cases and collaborate with us, cooperate in order to eliminate this. So I was just, sharing this because I think it is helpful. But in terms of the pandemic and all these cases which you all talked about, I think that from a side of the posting country, because Poland is one of the major posting countries in Europe, I think that rather the pandemic was not so impactful. Maybe there was like couple of tens of thousands, like 30, maybe 40 or 50,000 less A1s than usual, but which we can see probably in the EU reports on posting. It rather bumped up quite quickly. So it was a major nuisance, but not a complete slowdown. I would rather say that the problem was really telework, because it's not in a maybe construction sector, rather in other sectors, but the problem was really that, we didn't know how to handle those situations. Some of them were more like Article 12 posting, which consists of posting from one member state to another, but then we assessed some situations of the workers, like they seem to be fitting more into the Article 13 one, where a worker is working some part in Poland, some part in Germany, and fortunately the Commission gave the note and the recommendation to not change the applicable legislation, but in force majeure situations, and also in order to not allow this, because there would be a problem if it was not planned, the schedule was not planned, but it happened, and not to impact the social security and the rights of the workers in terms of their security in social insurance. They said that it would be better for them not to change their legislation, although the provisions said that they should be changed, right? So the legislation should be changed to for example, the country in which this telework was performed more than usual it would be, And I think that this is like from the posting side, posting member states vision, I would say, like point of view, this was really more important for us, at least for our institution topic, than the limitations itself. But this is just a comment from my side. And thank you for the ability.
Thank you very much, Michał. No, that was very, very interesting. And don't know if there are other comments. I see Marcin. Yeah. I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Hello. Good afternoon. Sorry. Okay. I hopefully can be heard now. Sorry, because I only joined you after the hour on the clock, so I missed some of the discussion. Apologies for that. It's just if I can have a couple of comments, really, also to what Michał previously mentioned. I would totally agree, especially with the things that he mentioned about those measures facilitating, especially the electronic exchange and electronic validation, right? That validator measure that Michał mentioned, that is indeed quite a novelty, and will or can go a long way towards actually benefiting both workers, but also those entrepreneurs who want to carry out postings in a legal manner, also careful with the workers' rights and their obligations towards workers, right? So this could go a long way towards ensuring that, right? Indeed, when it comes to the impact of COVID on Poland, this was actually when it comes to outgoing postings, outgoing from Poland, that was like the major impact seen as PDSA-1 issued by the ZUS. We actually, within the project called Posting Stat project grant, carried out with the leadership of the HIVA Leuven, we carried out those reports concerning like 10 partner countries, and of course our Polish report as well. I was responsible for that Polish one, and we could see the impact of COVID, especially when it comes to PDSA-1 in April and May 2020, and then surprisingly also in August and September 2020, right? But starting from the months in 2021, especially from April and May 2021, those numbers were already sort of bounced back when it comes to the numbers issued pre-COVID and in 2021, right? So we were back to pre-COVID levels already sometime in April, May 2021, right? And after all, in 2021, there were 675,000 of PDSA-1 issued altogether by Poland against 617,000, right? 617,000 in 2020, right? So we bounced back already by at least 70% year on year, and that was about 50,000 more than in 2020, in 2019, right? When it comes to the actual PDSA-1, and we're going for to be at the levels of 750 something this year, judging by the standards of PDSA-1 issued for months from January to June 2022. When it comes to, if I can also bounce with a final remark to what Lisa mentioned about the measures. Indeed, Polish both workers and entrepreneurs are very keen on acquiring information about Sokabał, and myself being also from like working both at the ELMI, European Labour Mobility Institute in Poland, dealing with think tank, dealing with post workers, and bringing together also entrepreneurs, posting workers from Poland. They very often, when it comes to postings of workers to Germany, they quite often mentioned their difficulties in actually deciding whether their given activity actually falls within the remit of Sokabał or not, right? So I guess perhaps a better. I'm sure you go a long way towards informing them, right? But it's just sometimes those bona fide entrepreneurs who actually want to get everything straight and get everything 100% legal, sometimes fall back on those obligations because they lack information, right? So perhaps providing or going towards a better enforcement in this regard would be very helpful for workers themselves as well. Okay,
thank you very much, Marcin. Thank you very much. I don't see more comment. I don't know if Lisa, you'd, yeah, just quickly because I give the floor to Sophia then.
Okay, just as an answer, thank you. Of course, we know that is a problem. And we have alone in our department 8 people who are checking if the person or the company falls under our paid leave scheme or not. So it's very difficult to provide information on that because it's always, it's like you have to really check the one company. It's not saying, okay, just you need this or that. It is very complex. So, but I take this with me and we try our best to give information out.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you again, Marcin and Michał, for these your comments and the spotlight on Poland. I give now the floor to Sofia Golandi from the Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini for a final remarks. Please, Sofia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giuseppe. I hope you can hear me well.
We
Great.
do. Yeah.
Thanks. So first of all, thanks to everybody for joining this workshop, and thanks for the opportunity to offer these final disclosing remarks in the framework of this topical discussion. I will be very short because we are running out of time. So, and I think everybody's very tired after this very technical discussion. So I do speak in representation of Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini, which is a partner of the EMEcs project and a research center based in Rome. Actually, I would like to thank Giuseppe for organizing the event and Feliciano for giving us insights about the policy recommendations. I will come back to this later. But also thanks to social partners for their availability and generosity to answer to our questions today. And of course, Lisa for her very effective summary of our experience and our needs emerged during this project, of course. And finally, thanks to the very high profile audience who joined us today. So since everything relevant has already been said, of course, I do not want to add anything else, but I would like just to let's say confirm and announce you that our policy recommendation are going through an editing, final editing and a review, internal review. And they will be very, very soon available on our website, and they will be shared with you, of course, and as well as to other relevant stakeholders. And that apart from information flows and related measures that Lisa highlight as being very, very relevant, and apart from health and let's say social protection presented earlier, I can confirm that we will touch other key issues, such as the involvement of social partners in the design of and implementation of the emergency provisions, the inspection and the on-site visits continuity to provide during emergency and let's say pandemic-related situations, as well as other hypotheses for the A1 forms of validity extensions that we discussed today. But we will also give recommendations with regard to the establishment of minimum standards to guarantee income stability in case of work interruptions and training for construction workers, including digital skills. So, while waiting for this key publication, I do recommend you to look at our other researches on the websites. And I would also recall, especially to Italian speaking colleagues here today, to register for our next EMEcs workshop, which will take place on the 6th of December online. And you will find the link and the news to register in the chat. I will copy paste it later in the chat. So thanks to all of you for being with us today. And having said that, I let the floor to Giuseppe to give you final greetings, I guess. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Sofia. Really, thank you. And so we are perfectly in time for the end of this meeting. Thank you very much for all the participants. A special thanks again, really big thank to Christine and Joachim for the very fruitful and useful discussion. That was really interesting. And Sofia also provided the dates for next upcoming meetings. So for the international audience, I would like to reiterate the 16th of December. We will share as soon as possible the registration link. Thank you again, everyone, and looking forward to meeting you at the final conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.